Hey guys, I'm Thomas and welcome back to Stylized Station. Now, you guys know I love and really appreciate beautiful game environments, and I also like making a good list video. So today, let's combine two of my favorite things and talk about the top 10 best environments in video games. If you're a video game artist looking for some inspiration or looking for a new game to dive into, this is probably the list for you. Also, if you want to learn more about creating environments, feel free to check out my courses. Okay, let's get into this week's video. Enjoy. If you haven't realized the influence of Far Cry 3 on the modern open world, then you probably need to play it again. Far Cry 3 had a huge map brimming with tons of detail. This isolated island location was filled with treacherous locales, predatory animals, aggressive factions, harmful natives, and shantytowns. What really made this world feel so alive back when it came out in 2012 was that this was a world that had its AI react to the way that you exist within it. Far Cry also really emphasized this with its story. The story focuses on how Jason Brody becomes more and more deplorable, giving you an unhinged protagonist who is hated by those he loves and loved by killers at the end. This is what makes the Far Cry environment such a playground. You can do as much damage to any and all of Voss's men that you can find. None of this is really breaking continuity, it just fits in the story. The Rook Islands are probably the most enjoyable and richly detailed video game that came out in 2012 since Arkham City. The islands are almost characters themselves, a tropical paradise with everything from thick jungle and rolling hills to subterranean caves and undulating rivers. You really feel like this place has been around a long time, even before you got there, and it will continue to grow and evolve long after you're gone. I truly loved this environment when it first came out. I recommend everyone plays this game if you get a chance. If there was a linear game world in recent memory that genuinely stood out to me as pure perfection, it has to be Hazelight Studios' It Takes Two. The game is literally an achievement in the world of co-op, and it wouldn't be half as close to perfection if it wasn't for the game's environments, at least in my opinion. It Takes Two has that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibe going on. However, all of the toys and inanimate objects have developed sentience, and they are now out to get you. I think this gives the studio so much creative freedom. There are levels that really mesmerized me while playing through them. From the town inside of a clock, to a whole world within a snow globe, fighting a squirrel general on top of a makeshift plane. The creativity in this game really is never ending. It also helps that the environment is littered with tons of little details, mini games, and beautiful art design that makes it all the more lovable. Really fun game to play with your girlfriend or boyfriend. If a cutesy, adorable game environment isn't really your thing, then Control's brutalist takes on the supernatural should definitely be more up your alley. Control takes place entirely inside of one building, the headquarters of a secret organization whose sole purpose is to keep the peace around the world from ominous threats. Now, since this game is set in just one building, you know the design of the building is going to be pretty special. What I really love about the world of Control is how colorful it is, from the crimson reds to the striking yellows and greens, and not to mention the game has some of the best lighting I've seen in a long time. It sets up the tone for an ominous story, full of vague storytelling and even more vague characters. The world itself tells a story too, especially during the side missions when you're hunting down SCPs. The beauty of this video game environment is showcased best during the maze sequence, in my opinion, an ever-twisting and turning world that never stagnates. I'm definitely going to be doing a video on the VFX of Control in the near future, because they do a lot of cool stuff, so check out that video when it comes out. Sony Santa Monica's crown jewel, God of War, has always managed to be a game with a beautiful setting. The setting in these games often contrasts with our brutal main character, Kratos, and in God of War, this really is more evident than ever. God of War brings the franchise out of the Greek world and does a deep dive into Norse mythology. The dynamic shift brings a whole new environment with it, one that is very different to its roots. One of my favorite parts of God of War is the way they do environmental storytelling, meaning the realms themselves tell their own story. If you head to the beautiful, lush alien world of Alfheim, you'll quickly realize that this realm has been embroiled in a war between dark and light that has lasted for thousands of years. Or what about the level where you're climbing a massive fallen ice giant whose final breath has rendered the landscape into an icy wasteland? There are a bunch of different worlds to explore here, and each one brings a beautiful new environment to the main stage. Of course, this is just a quick top 10 list, so I'd love to go into the real details of the design of God of War in a future video. In fact, I'm planning to. There really isn't anything like entering Lindell, the royal capital in Elden Ring, for the first time. The possibility that you can go everywhere that the eye can see, the large stone dragon in the distance, the fallen grace of the Erd tree. This is Elden Ring telling you a story through its environment. FromSoft always had a knack for storytelling through their environments, but in Elden Ring, I think they really outdone themselves. Each nook and cranny of this open world is full of detail, slowly hand-feeding you more lore about its world and characters. Rhea Lucaria, Stormvale Castle, Volcano Manor, Lindell, the royal capital, Miquella's Hail Tree, the Ashen City, and crumbling Farum Azula all have distinct designs to their creation. Every section of this wide open map feels like a different world, and then you have the underground to explore as well. Even deep rooted within the city, there are hidden locations such as the Prince of Death's throne room, the Lake of Rot, Mogwin Palace, and many more locations that are handcrafted to be immersive and full of character. I am so sorry for butchering some of these words. The Bioshock series is mainly known for its incredible design of its main city, Rapture, a steampunk-esque underwater city. But Bioshock Infinite's flying city of Columbia has always had a special place in my heart. Columbia floats above the North American continent and is comprised of neoclassical buildings similar to those present within the White City of the 1893 Chicago World Fair. The design relies heavily upon neoclassical and colonial American influences for its architecture. While reactors, propellers, and balloons are present all throughout the city, its ability to float is due to quantum levitation, which allows objects to be suspended indefinitely. The city is also designed with rain catchers that collect water from precipitation in the clouds to keep the vegetation and populace supplied with water. This world also has a lot of cool innovative design as well. Other technological wonders such as complex automatons, advanced weapons, recording devices, and even crude cybernetics were developed in the story of Columbia. Columbia is a deceiving place, an environment that makes you feel like you're in a safe space. However, that isn't the case at all once you actually find yourself here. You realize quickly that this place is radical, hateful, and full of people that think themselves superior to those that literally live below them. The racism, fascism, and hatred in the minds of the people are what really fuels Columbia. This is really hidden in the beautiful vistas, the soaring skylines, and the beautiful colors of this place. The only real semblance of goodness in this place is what you find after meeting Elizabeth, and that goodness is constantly being chased after by the powers that be. The environment is full of these radical characters, but not just in the NPCs, but in the stores, the newspapers, the walls, the propaganda, and in the crowds. The game world is designed to make you feel claustrophobic and that you don't really belong here. Columbia really is one of the most unique environments that I've seen in a very, very long time. There's something really liberating about a game world that doesn't tell you what to do. A game world that trusts you as a player to find your own path. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has a world that is made to be a complete sandbox for the player. Hyrule is an open playground for those who want to push the envelope of your gameplay creativity. There are limitless dungeons to explore, camps to raid, and items to find. There's a huge emphasis on exploring this vast landscape, and it's the designs of this world that keeps your curiosity pushing forward. Hyrule is the perfect definition of a sandbox world. The game pushes you to explore, learn its systems, and then put them to use against enemies. The more you explore, the more chances you have of finding better gear and getting better at the game. There's an unlimited wealth of resources here that you need to get through in Breath of the Wild, and Link really is an empty canvas for your creativity. A complete and polar opposite to the Breath of the Wild, The Last of Us Part 2 has a mostly linear world design. However, that world is filled to the brim with every inch of detail that you would expect from a post-apocalyptic zombie outbreak setting. This is a dark and brooding game, full of characters that are broken, lost, and terrified of their surrounding. This game focuses on these aspects, creating an environment full of these dark details. The world of The Last of Us 2 is also filled with a variety of beautiful, lush, overgrown plant life that helps add to the feeling that humanity is slowly fading away. And I feel that every single plant is placed in such a natural way that you almost feel like that leaf was handcrafted for that exact purpose. Ellie's nightmarish revenge quest is full of violence, and this world really exudes that feeling. There's a limitless number of enemies that will beg for their lives when you're about to pull a trigger, and they'll call out for their fallen pals and friends. Meanwhile, as Abby, you get to witness a community on the verge of fallout and get to experience it firsthand. This world showcases you all of it through the hidden letters, voice memos, and intricately recreated Seattle. I'd like to ask you a question. What could be more terrifying than a world where nuclear war has destroyed everything? Well, maybe a world where the radioactive nature of the environment has led to animals being mutated into horrifying monsters, and people have fallen victim to cannibalism, ruthless barons, and broken political agendas. That sounds pretty scary too. Metro Exodus combines all of those as you venture out of the underground metro system of Moscow and into the open country. This game brings you through multiple small maps and gives you the freedom to explore them at your own pace. The Volga is a riverside community ruled by an unholy religion, and the desert is ruled by a Mad Max referenced baron, whereas the mountain the squad heads up to is held captive by cannibal factions. There is so much visceral beauty to this world that you can't help but be immersed. It doesn't force a large open world on you, but rather a smaller world full of detail down to the very core of its gameplay. Metro Exodus does an excellent job of promoting the joy of discovering things in its open levels, which is crucial for open world games to get right. Many games either tell you what and where everything is ahead of time with map icons, or don't reward players well for investigating every nook and cranny, making the game world boring and unfulfilling to explore by intelligently limiting how much information the player can get their hands on before they adventure around its levels. Your map starts off completely blank, and while you can get a rough idea of where the points of interest are by getting to high ground and scoping out the area with binoculars, the only icon you'll ever get on your map is a question mark. The game never tells you what to expect from each of its locations, keeping the player on its toes. Is that structure a safe house where you can rest, or is it a den full of mutants? Is it a bandit camp or a large cache of useful supplies? You won't know until you go there yourself and find out, and that is one of the reasons why I think Metro Exodus has such an immersive and fun world to explore. In my number one spot, we have a world that is so well realized that it almost lends itself to hyperrealism. Red Dead Redemption 2's version of a West that is being tamed is genuinely a sight to behold. It is a beautiful world full of geographical variety, from snowy mountaintops to deserts, wide open plains, forests, rocky hillsides, swamps, towns, and cities. There's everything you can think of. This world is truly alive, and there are so many animals and plants here that you could never hunt and collect all of them even if you wanted. The dynamic NPC events here are what really push this world into an everlasting realistic tone. You will be constantly running into people that need your help or just want to mess with you. There are super random quests hidden around the world for those that wish to explore, and there are secrets hiding in random locations around the map, and there are characters that you could truly bond with in this world. It's a game that offers you the choice between exploring its environment or pushing through the story. However, if you choose to do both those things at the same time, you'll find yourself at a crossroads between a world so realistic that the real world just pales in comparison. So yeah, environments are pretty cool.